Zach, thanks a lot for sitting down with us. Really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of really great work in not just in the movement related music scene, but in the music scene in general. Like you're starting to become more of a big name in hip hop. And I noticed, this is a really revolutionary crowd here in Madison. We've got a radical history in this town. I wanted you to talk a little bit about, how you use your music to inspire revolution in young people through hip hop and through your lyrics.
I think for me, when we talk about revolution, it's very easy to romanticize, people with a gun or marching in the street. But I think before we take any of those actions, violence, of course, being the last one, the person has to have a revolution of the mind. And I think that's where I start. That's why I encourage people to do most. To have that sort of realization and understanding that you're dealing not with America, but the mythology of America. You're not just dealing with colonialism, but the mythology of colonialism. You're not just dealing with white supremacy, you're dealing with the mythology of white supremacy. You're not dealing with communism, you're dealing with the mythology of communism. You're not dealing with capitalism, etc. And I think that if people can get to a historical understanding of these things, then it makes the direction that we're headed in this society a lot clearer for people. And I think that when you realize that, for example, something like democracy has been on the opposite side of capitalism throughout the history of America, going back to the robber barons, going back to the theft of indigenous men, I think that tells a lot of stories about it. It also explains how there was always a buffer of working class white Americans that were pitted against other working class Americans, like Latinos and blacks. They really had a lot more in common in terms of their struggle against the people that were keeping their wages low, trying to deprive them of having health care benefits for as long as we can remember in society. And I think that when we get to those interpersonal stories, it helps to build that camaraderie between people that understand it better. And even maybe the people on the top, the rich kids, that are saying, hey man, I don't want to be a scumbag as a legacy. I don't want to just take from people. I want to be able to give something back. Obviously, I can't be held responsible for the actions of my forefathers, but if I do nothing to correct that, if I continue to benefit from it, if I live in denial of what it is, then aren't I just a continuation of that legacy? And can I break away? And the answer is yes. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are. I always tell people, to be part of hip-hop, you just need to have heart. And you need to have the courage to tell the truth.
Well, that was one of the things that really got to me about Tupac's music, and I remember, as a young white kid growing up in Kentucky, I couldn't, directly relate to that, but when I got older and I listened to it again, I noticed that Tupac spoke directly to young people by relating their situations in his lyrics, like in Keep Your Head Up, when it's funny, it rains and pours, got money for more, we can't feed the poor, and that's just as true today as it was back when he wrote those lyrics. I mean, do you think the lyrics that you're spitting and Brother Ali is writing and all the movement related rappers, do you think you're starting to break through the noise of the consumer's mainstream hip hop machine a little bit?
It's hard to do that without having access to the same sort of gigantic corporate machine that they have, but at the same time, we're definitely making inroads into places. I mean, if we can sell out a venue that's just as big as this in Omaha, if we can do a sellout tomorrow in Chicago, which looks like it's going to happen for 11, 1,200 people, then obviously everyone will know that affecting between 700 to 1,000 people in every city, every major city, in damn near every state in America. I think that it's a good start. And I think that it also tells people, and it gives them an example of how independent hip hop is able to do this without gigantic corporate support. We don't have Pepsi sponsoring the tour. We don't have Monster Energy drink sponsoring the tour. Probably because I don't drink that shit. But the point I'm trying to make is that if we can rely on the power of the audience, and if we can pick and choose the sponsors to say, hey, can I just be sponsored by some shit that doesn't kill people, you know what I mean, one way or another, something that doesn't fill their body with toxic carcinogens, something that doesn't fill their body with chemical poisons that people spray on their food to make it feel like it tastes good when it really doesn't taste like shit. if I can do that, then we send a message to people that it's not a question of either being the most radical individual in the world and, you know, fuck conformity on every single level. And it's not about being an uber sellout where it's like, you know, I'm gonna start, you know, prostituting myself and selling Doritos, you know, on TV or some shit. You have to find a medium to advance your career at some point, and then you have to make that decision. What is it going to be? Are you going to continue down the independent path, or did you just build this business up so you could sell it someday? Or you know, if you build a business one day, well, imagine you got a car repair shop, things go really well, you got 2 or 3 of them. You say, hey, if you want your car fixed, people start associating that with you. And they say, man, this guy has real cheap deals, great service, fuck it, man. And then one day you say to yourself, some people want to invest billions of dollars and go national, but I'm going to lose control of the shit. Someone else is going to come take over. Or I can stay with this kind of quote-unquote mom and pop thing, but I'm still making $1 million a year. Which one am I going to do?
Well, you know, speaking to the state of young people today, you know, certainly it's different than in you know, Tupac's heyday. Where, you know, now we've got like $1 trillion in student loan debt that's accumulated. Young people are, you know, living with their parents when they graduate college. It's really hard to find steady work these days. I mean, given the state of affairs for, you know, especially this generation that your music speaks to the most, do you feel that, I mean, that this sort of mainstream corporate music is becoming less relevant and music like yours is becoming more relevant to our situation?
I mean, I think that's probably something that I need a little bit of clairvoyance look into the future to tell, but I definitely do see a trend of people paying more attention to what I do. Not necessarily do I think that's a correlation of them paying less attention to anything else. It may just be the market expanding and more young people, more people that have never heard hip-hop that like my music. I mean, that's one thing I would say about myself. I definitely do attract a very diverse crowd of people that I've had people come up to me, they're like, yo, I just like hardcore metal bands, and I really didn't like hip hop, but I liked your shit because it was violent, violence had a purpose. You know, similar to the way a lot of really those gory, like scary rock and roll bands had all the devilish imagery. But at the same time, it's not because they were devil worshippers, they were saying that society is run by devils, that it's human society that created these things, and they become the devils. And this is what you worship. This money is what you worship. This idea is what you worship. Now, most of those guys went on to do like living in the castle in England type of shit, you know, selling their merchandise for $50 a shirt. So at some point, art has to either betray itself or conform to the old strict guidelines that it's set forth for how it was going to act in the future. But I think for me, one of the best things that I've been able to do is to present people with the idea that they don't have to either choose to save the world or to become an awful sellout. You can say to people, listen, dude, how are you going to save the world if you can't even save yourself? Why don't you try to affect one person's life who's in your life, and that'll be your start. You know? I went to Afghanistan to open an orphanage in a school with a Made International. If I can succeed under those conditions, what's to stop anybody here in Madison, Wisconsin from succeeding and changing their community here? I mean, I'm not trying to sell pipe dreams to people. I'm not giving them some fake utopia. I'm not telling them it's easy. If it was easy, everyone would do it. But you don't fight the fights that can win. You fight the fights that need fighting. You know? That's a necessary part of it.
Well, you know, in terms of, you know, in the next, say, 4 to 6 years, you know, I think there seems to be like a growing amount of young people who are taking an interest in wanting to directly affect the political system, not just through organizing movements, but through like, you know, independent runs for, you know, against the two-party duopoly. I know your song "Leaving the Past." You had a lyric, "Humanity's gone, smoked up in a gravity bomb by a Democrat Republican choose your song," and you know, there seems to be a growing movement for, you know, and a growing desire for independent political voices. I mean, do you think people who like listen to your music or people, you know, in this generation, do you think there's a future for that? Like, can we take over this political system in a non-violent manner through, you know, methods like that?
I mean, I think that's one option. I don't think we should exhaust any options. I think all of them should be on the table when it comes to dealing with the corrupt system. values, your belief system, that's the welcome mat to fascism. You know what I mean? It's like when I deal with people that are fanatically religious, like I tell them, I can't believe that your faith in your God is so weak that the fact that I don't believe in what you believe in makes you ultimately threatened by my beliefs. You know, if a person is Muslim, if a person is Jewish, if a person is Christian, if a person is an atheist, a Buddhist, if you're Hindu, dude, as long as that makes you a better person, if it makes you see people as human beings and treat them better, then I think that's a positive thing in your life. But if it makes you more pious, if it makes you more judgmental, if it makes you more holier than thou, if it makes you think that somehow God created you better than everybody else, then not only have you failed that religion, but that religion has failed you. Or not only has that religion failed you, but you failed that religion.
Now, in terms of the social movements here, you mentioned that if people are threatened by you speaking their mind, that's welcome back to fascism. Have you heard of the crackdown on the daily sing-alongs in the Wisconsin State Capitol? People are basically what's happened in the last 2 years since the uprising in the Capitol. A group of people have started getting together.
Oh, I saw this when they arrested like a war veteran and they stomped his American flag and shit. What the hell was that, yo? I was furious about that, yo. My brother is in the Marine Corps. He was fucking angry as hell. He's like, yo, dude, here's a guy who risked his life for this country and he's getting his flag stomped on by a mall cop. A dude that I don't even know who that guy was, but that's just crazy to me. That you can't sing, you can't petition your government in some way, shape, or form. That's not the welcome mat to fascism. That's when you leave your boots at the door in the house, and that's just ridiculous. You know, I think that if Mr. Walker wants to set up a totalitarian regime, then, you know, he can move to South Carolina with the rest of the fanatics. But I'll be there too to wipe you out at some point. I think that the point I'm trying to make is not to divide and among demographic, but to show people that if you're willing to shame the devil, if you're willing to shame the government into saying, look what you're doing, you're arresting people that are singing, you're arresting, peacefully demonstrating people who aren't trying to burn anything down, you know? So how would you react if you did have that? Is that what you prefer? Would you prefer us to have a riot so you could justify an overinflated police budget? So you could increase that buffer zone in between the 1% and then everybody else? You know, at that particular point is where you see how racism defends classism. Because you do have a situation where you'll take a working class white population and you'll say, oh, we need a police force. So, why? Because originally after Reconstruction in the South, the rich white landowners didn't want to hold down their own plantation. They said, no, we're going to hire some of these poor people. That they call the poor people rednecks. You know why? Because when they worked out in the sun all day, they busted their ass, and when they came home, they didn't tan too well, they took their shirt off, and they had a white bag and a red neck. But the slave master, the man in the big house, didn't have a redneck. He was under that porch drinking lemonade all day, watching you pour white trash. Because he ain't gonna marry none of his daughters to you motherfuckers. That's how they see people. But instead of looking at it from a class angle, we're automatically thrown into the racial paradigm. Which is unfortunate because that's what America should have dealt with in the very beginning. Like I always tell people, imagine, we're just short on time, imagine if that had actually been what it was on paper. Imagine if everyone had got here, brother, in 1776 and they said, hey, listen, you know what? You're from India, you're from Ireland, you're from Russia, you know, you're from fucking Turkey, you're from Africa. You're all equal. Welcome to America. You'll all be protected and treated the same under the law. And the reason I think that was impossible is because from the moment all those immigrants came off that boat, they were on land that had been stolen from people that had been genocided to make room for a colonial invasion.
I have one more question. You know, it seems like everybody in this country, no matter who you vote for, what you believe in, everybody is really angry about something to the point of wanting to take to the streets. And it seems that the media is, and the politicians are intent on keeping us divided, like you said, along these false paradigms. What are some ways that we can bring this righteous anger together under, you know, one people and really affect change?
I mean, obviously I choose the medium of music to be able to speak on that. But I think that there are so many different ways to do it. Through independent journalism, you know what I mean? Through being a teacher, through teaching in prisons. That's something that I definitely did before that I would look forward to doing again, even though it's very difficult. I think that though beyond just that, people are willing to give their time rather than just their money. Or rather, if people are willing to give their time rather than just their money, they'll realize that that investment goes actually much further than, signing a $10 check off to some organization and being like, deal with your own problem. Actually having someone there physically caring, another human being who can share a complex amount of experiences in their life with other people and say, hey, listen, look what's going on with me. Let me break it down for you. I think we're seeing more of that these days. So that's important. And I think that if you have people that are willing to just challenge the status quo in their mind first, or anyone else, that speaks volumes about how far we can go. And I just want to send a big shout out to State of Solidarity to the people that are out there singing, because you're not breaking the law, you're being an American, and more of an American